Wow, this is extraordinary and special. I've been sitting there trying to think of whether I drink a lot of wine and numb myself before getting up or wait until I get back, and I compromised. Thank you, Mike Heyman, for that very generous and wonderful introduction. Chancellor and Mrs. Bergeneau, the California Alumni Association, and let me say especially Annette Ramirez, who steered me, guided me, and was just remarkable in making sure I got here with all of my tux on. My family, distinguished guests and friends, and classmates. Let me start an ad lib. I've never said this to David and Zoe Ellis, my godchildren, but I thought for a long time that they couldn't have pronounced Thelton, such a common name, that they were retarded. And also, some of you came up to the table. I'm sitting there, honored to be sitting there between Chancellor and Mrs. Bergeneau, and some of you came up and said, why do they look so especially happy after the Chancellor got up here and spoke? And I'll share this with you. After the Chancellor got up here and said that he had gotten a $133 million matching grant, I seized upon the moment. And as soon as he came back, I leaned over and said, count me in for $100. And so he's feeling good now. Mike, I caught this from you, dropping the page. Although it will be some 57 years this coming July, I can still recall as clear as day my first exam question as a student at UC Berkeley. Give the significance of Napoleon's blockade of England, I was asked by my History 4A professor. I'd come to Cal to play football for Pappy Waldorf from Jefferson High in South Central LA, a place we residents call the East Side. It was a good time to come to Cal to play football, for that past January marked Cal's third straight appearance in the Rose Bowl. And my dear grandmother, who has long passed, who knew nothing of football and even less of Cal, except that her grandson had gone to Cal to play football, would nonetheless, whenever the subject of Cal and football came up in her living room, and that's where we all gathered because she was the matriarch, she would look up from her knitting and say knowingly, Cal used to have good teams until Thelton got hurt. And that was the definitive family version of the history of Cal football. I had been admitted to Cal on the condition that I take 2 summer school courses before I could enroll in September as a full-time student. I was told that I had to get at least a B in one course and a C would suffice in the other. No problem, I thought to myself. Despite my confidence, I was careful to follow the advice I had received from a wonderful Cal alum named Frank Stormett, who had helped persuade me to come to Cal. Mr. Starmett was president of the Los Angeles Alumni Club called the Southern Seas. His advice, which I followed all my years at Cal: study at least 3 hours for every 1 hour of class time. Now back to the question so indelibly burned into my brain. Give the significance of Napoleon's blockade of England. Quickly reading the question, and I thought just as quickly understanding it, I immediately began writing. I was a bit nervous, but I was also excited. My first college exam. And I had studied as hard as I could, or at least as hard as Frank Stormont said I should. So I wrote down everything about Napoleon that I had read in the textbook. He was born in Corsica. It's all true. On August 15th, 1769. He was trained as an artillery officer. He staged a coup d'etat in 1799 and installed himself as first consul, etc., etc., etc. And I wrote down everything I knew about the blockade. It was enacted with the Decree of Berlin and signed in 1806. Under it, all English property found within Napoleon's boundaries was considered a prize of war. Fascinating stuff. I wrote down all the facts that I could recall from so assiduously doing my homework assignments. Even to this day, I wince a bit as I remember how I felt when I got my blue book back with the grade written on the inside cover. A big, large, red D. When I recovered from my shock and disappointment and the feeling that I was already headed back to the East Side as a failure, I noticed a note from the professor written right under the big red D. "Mr. Henderson, please come see me about your paper." And of course, I did so. And I still look upon that meeting as one of the most important events of my life. As I sat down, the professor told me I really should have gotten an F. But he gave me a D because he knew I had studied. He told me that he had written the textbook that we were using. And I had thrown back almost every bit of trivia, including things from his footnotes about Napoleon and the blockade of England. He explained that this kind of diligence deserved better than an F, but not much. What I hadn't done, he gently informed me, was tell him the significance of Napoleon's blockade of England. The significance, he stressed. What did it mean? Why was it important? What were its ramifications? He continued to talk, patiently and almost paternally, and eventually with, I thought, a bit of frustration as he began to realize how utterly clueless I seemed to be. And then, somewhere along the way that important morning, a light bulb seemed to go off in my head. I had never in my life had an essay question presented to me. I had only been taught how to read and regurgitate what I had read, usually in the form of true-false questions or multiple choice. No teacher, as far as I could recall, had ever asked me to reason through or analyze a problem, much less tell them the significance of something. The professor seemed to take me on right there on the spot as a special project. he told me to go see if the athletics department would pay for a tutor. The next day, when I returned to tell him that they would, he announced that his teaching assistant would serve as my tutor, and he introduced the two of us right there on the spot. And over the next couple of months, summer school, a whole new world of thinking and learning and ideas began to emerge from me. Thus began my 7-year journey through UC Berkeley and Boalt Hall. The episode was incredibly important to me personally, for without that professor's concern and intervention, I would have continued to study as hard as Frank Starmett told me I should. Then I would have regurgitated what I had read, and then I would have flunked out of summer school, and then I would have gone back to contemplate the rest of my life as one of the boys in the hood. But that interaction of mine, I think, also exemplifies so many things that make Cal the transformative educational institution that it is. There are certainly universities of Cal's caliber in this country and in the world, whose incoming students are already well-versed in critical thinking and battle-ready for college. As one of the nation's finest universities, Cal attracts such students as well. But Cal is also a state school. It provides a unique opportunity for students like me, who arguably have the raw material to succeed, but whose educational background before college simply does not prepare us for university-level scholarship, even if we're motivated and disciplined. What my experience shows, I think, is that Cal doesn't just admit students from a wide range of backgrounds, which it most certainly does. It also gives them the tools they need to succeed. Professors who are genuinely interested in the intellectual development and success of their students. Professors who take the time to give individual attention to rescue lambs like myself, lost in the wilderness of a scary and intimidating new environment, and an education that teaches students to think critically, gives them the analytical tools to explore the intellectual world, and imbues them with the self-confidence to think originally. Cal didn't just admit me, let me walk in the door on a football scholarship, and send me on my way. Cal gave me an intellectual admission to university life and to my professional life, and to the rather amazing sequence of events which allow me the privilege of standing before you tonight and join the company of the likes of Earl Warren and Glenn Seaborg and Roger Traynor and Maxine Hong Kingston, Alan Broussard, Walter Haas, and last year's recipient, Donald G. Fisher. I most certainly hope that the old adage is true, that we're known by the company we keep, because that's good company. If my mom were here, I know she would say, "Son, you're chopping in the high cotton." And indeed I am. That first summer at Cal, I managed to get the grades I needed, 1B and 1C, and eventually to even raise my hand in class and engage in fascinating dialogues with wonderful professors such as Jacobus Tenbrook and Garth Wilson, who stretched me and helped shape me. I learned to eschew rote learning and ultimately to graduate with pretty good grades and get into Boalt Hall. And then, to my utter amazement, At Bolt Hall, it started all over again. You've got to learn how to think like a lawyer, I was repeatedly told. And I thought to myself, I thought I already learned how to think. But thinking like a lawyer is something else again, as you lawyers in the audience well know. The older professors at Bolt Hall seemed to me to be perfect models for Professor Charles Kingsfield, the brilliant but demanding professor in the movie Paper Chase. But 4 extraordinary young law professors started their teaching careers during my first year at Bolt, and my class fondly called them the 4 H's: Jeffrey Hazard, Ed Hallback, John Hetland, and Ira Michael Heyman, who introduced me here tonight. They seem to be much less like Professor Kingsfield. They were exactly what I needed for law school. A lot less forbidding, a lot more open, a bit more nurturing, and they successfully retooled my hard-won undergraduate analytical skills and taught me how to think like a lawyer. None more than Mike Heyman, whom I'm so proud today to call my former law professor, but more importantly, my present dear friend and my mentor. And I owe all of that to the inclusive and nurturing type of institution that Cal provides and does so well. And so for the past 27 years as a federal judge, I've struggled with some of the most important issues of the day, and I still call upon my Cal education and experiences and contacts as I try to decide such things as, should I temporarily enjoin the Naval Air Station from its important activities until more is learned about the environmental impact of these activities on the surrounding community? Or what do I do when I get an emergency motion at 10 a.m.? Do I order the government not to put a citizen of El Salvador on a plane at 4 p.m. that very day because he may be killed upon touchdown in El Salvador due to his political activities? Or do I send a drug addict who has robbed multiple banks in order to support his drug habit to prison for 9 years, as the prosecutor demands? Or do I, as defense counsel argues, send him to the Delancey Street Foundation, where Mimi Silbert, a previous alumna of the year, by the way, does such a spectacular job of rehabilitating addicts? Or do I do something in between? And how do I turn the California prison system around so that we no longer have a prisoner die on average of every 6 days for want of adequate medical care? Daunting issues all, and all in a day's work. Beginning with that wonderful History 4A professor who saved my life, through Jacobus Timbrook and Garth Wilson, on to the 4 H's at Bolt, and Dick Buxbaum and Herma Hill Kay and Bob Cole and Jess Choper. I can say with some measure of confidence and much pride that my University of California journey, with my education, my experiences, and my friendships that continue to this very day, and so many of you are here tonight, and thank you, that they have prepared me for the wonderful and challenging and fulfilling life that I have lived and am living, and I will be forever grateful for that. Now, there are always important friends to acknowledge, but someone warned me to look at reruns of the Academy Awards if I need to be reminded of how long that can take when you truly try to acknowledge everyone who deserves it. I'll acknowledge my family and near family. My son Jeff, who helped me up here and is wonderful. My grandson Brian, the Bry Man. I'm so proud. Jeff's fiance, that's the near, was supposed to be here and she got ill and couldn't come. My cousin Corliss Carson and her husband Mickey Carson. And the Haas family was so kind to seat them at their table. Thank you. And a very special young man I've known since he was 4 years old and who probably gets the long distance award tonight for going the farthest, for he flew in from Oxford University to be with me this night, John Donovan Maher. Thank you, John. Now I'm going to do something. I'm going to ask the East Side boys. You guys came up from LA and I haven't seen some of you in 40 years. Would you just stand, be with me here tonight? And despite what I just said, I'll thank one friend by name, and that's Jim Johnson. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. For this whole thing would not have been possible but for your nominating me for this award. My alumni buddies, my judicial buddies, my fishing buddies, my poker buddies. You know who you are, and I won't specify you, but I love you and thank you. So ends my homage to that History 4A professor who showed me the way all those years ago, and I tried desperately to recapture his name, and I couldn't do it. I asked Professor Ellis, Provost Ellis, to help me, and I was told that the records don't go back that far. And that's my loss for not remembering that wonderful man's loss. And so here I am, truly humble to be standing before you and to be joining such an esteemed group of alumni and to share this honor with them. Thank you all very, very much.